Hey, how are you?
We took your suggestion a little bit, so they've been thinking.
I say la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, don't you forget about me.
Hold up. Where did it go?
What's wrong with the world, mama? People living like they ain't got no mamas. I think the whole world addicted to the drama, only attracted to the things that'll bring you trauma. Overseas, yeah, we trying to stop terrorism, but we still got terrorists here living in the USA, the big CIA, the Bloods and the Crips and the KKK. But if you only have love for your own race, then you only leave space to discriminate, and to discriminate only generates hate. And when you hate, then you're bound to get irate. Yeah, madness is what you demonstrate, and that's exactly how anger works and operates. Man, you gotta have love just to set it straight. Take control of your mind and meditate. Let your soul gravitate to the love, y'all.
People killing, people dying, children hurt, you hear them cry. You practice what you preach, but you turn the other cheek. Father, 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 help us. Get some guidance from above. You got me questioning. Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love?
It just ain't the same, always unchanged. New days are strange, it's more insane. If love and pieces are strong, where are the pieces of love that don't belong? Nation dropping bombs, chemical gases filling lungs of little ones, with ongoing suffering as the young die young. So ashes of love really gone, so I can ask myself really what's going wrong. Is the world that we're living in, people keep on giving in, making wrong decisions, only visions of the dividends, respecting each other, deny thy brother. The war is going on, but the reason's undercover. The truth is kept secret, swept under the rug. If you don't know truth, then you never know love. Where's the love, y'all? Where's the truth, y'all? Where's the love, y'all?
People killing, people dying, children hurt, you hear them cry. If you practice what you preach, but you turn the other cheek. Father, 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 help us. Get some guidance from above. You got me questioning. Where is the love? Where is the love? Oh, love. Where is the love? 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 Where is the love?
I'm sorry. Didn't think of it.
The Hoover Board of Education meeting is now called to order. Dr. Garnigan, thank you. very much for the use of your facility tonight, and the choir sounded amazing. So good. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for being here tonight. At this time, you have the agenda before you for today's board meeting. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. At this time, what we've all been waiting for, Dr. Kenny Behrens, Chairman of the ASB Superintendent Committee, will present our 5 finalists. Dr. Behrens.
It is a pleasure to be back here, and I'm very excited to be here this evening and to move on with this process. And I want to compliment the board. They have been so patient, just like I asked them to be during this time, from the time the job was posted until today. The public has been very patient, and media, I thank you too. Until yesterday, you were very patient. But I did not tell any of you anything ahead of time, so just know you're all on the same page. I want to, it'll take me probably about 7 or 8 minutes before I actually start reading off the names, because I want to talk about where we are in this process and what's going to happen next. So as I mentioned, of course, we posted the job, we have screened the applicants. My colleagues and I in Montgomery, we spent a day there. We came up with a slate of candidates, more than the number that we knew we would bring forward, knowing that there would be some people, well, we know some people are in multiple searches. We also know that some people, for personal or professional reasons, when it gets right down to it, they decide that this is not the best for them at this time. So we go through all of that. Our number has firmed up at 5. I know you would read a little more than 5, maybe more than 5, but it's a very fluid process, especially this time of the year. Not just our search, but other searches as well. So what is going to happen next is, after I read off the names, and I will be giving you a media packet before I read them off, a blue folder to pass on down the road there. And then before you go home, I have a packet with all of the submitted documents from each candidate. You will take that home. I'm giving you homework. I want you to read about each candidate, everything that they have submitted, particularly before each person's interview. Then interview day will be coming. We're going to discuss that after I name the 5 people. There will be a session with the board members to talk about what interview day will look like, what those interview days will be. The candidates are expecting a call from the board president either this evening or tomorrow morning to work out a schedule for the interview. The interviews are public, and I'll address that in a minute. That becomes somewhat of a challenge for our out-of-state people, and I'll explain why in a minute. But the interviews are public in our state, and we do encourage the school system to video record them and post those interviews on the website. We encourage the questions to go out ahead of time, and you might say, oh my goodness, how will we know who can think on their feet if you give out the questions ahead of time? Well, since these are public interviews, the first person would be at a real disadvantage, wouldn't he or she, if anybody else could know what the questions are. The board is allowed to ask follow-up questions to the list that has gone out once they begin the interview process. And it may be that the board decides that they will have one social gathering with the candidate, such as a meal. Most boards do have one meal, a lunch or a dinner, with the candidate. However, no business is conducted at that time, and that is not the interview. So, and that is something that is announced, and that is something where the doors are opened, when they're going to have a meal. After the interviews are complete, and I do ask, I always hear kids say, don't judge me. Well, I ask you, don't get too far with your judging until after you've heard all the interviews, until you've gotten to know these people. Continue to do such a good job as you've done, keeping an open mind. Then we ask that boards give themselves several days after the interviews to process everything. It's really a lot to sink in. The interviews are usually an hour to an hour and a half, usually 12 to 15 questions. So we ask them to process everything, and then at that point, they're going to be ready for a public discussion. And we do ask at the public discussion, no disparaging comments board members can discuss candidates without disparaging comments, because all of these people have jobs to go to back at home. Out of the 5, only 1 person can get the job. So 4 people will be going back home. And because of the quality of candidates that we choose, you know, they establish positive rapport with the people at home. So those are tricky, I might say, to have that public discussion, but we do that, it's required, and it can be done, and we'll kind of coach you ahead of time, the process or procedure for doing that. Then at that point, the board will know, well, do we need to call 2 back to re-interview? Do we need to narrow it down between these 2? Or do we want to go visit their communities? And 2 of us go to one community and 2 to another, and visit and talk to people on the street and that type of thing. So we don't know yet. We don't know how it will unfold. And that's how it's supposed to be. We're not to know. Maybe the board, you know, everybody in their little notes will end up on after discussion as bingo. You know, we know who the person will be. That is all yet to be decided. The board members do not have a clue the names that I have here. And I took it as a compliment that the school board attorney said that nothing's leaked out. And I said, well, good, then we did our job right. So with that, let me see if there's anything else that I need to mention to you beforehand. You are, board members, you are getting, inside of here is the little media sheet that the media will get. And by the way, Jason will be your contact person, media people. I have a hard copy for you. I will be sending him an electronic copy, and what I'm going to share in a few minutes, you can get a copy of hard copy now, electronic copy in a little bit from him. But the interview guide, there's an interview guide here. I sent you an electronic version earlier. I know you're working on your interview questions. We'll talk about that in a little bit also. Sample contracts, when it comes time for generating a contract, that becomes a legal document. You will work with your attorney. We also have sample contracts I'll be sending you via email, and you probably have a standard template that you use, but we'll have others also if they want to look at that. Look at those. You have paid, I'll remind you, for a goal setting session with AASB once your superintendent is hired. The new superintendent and the board has already paid for a goal setting session, so I just want to remind you that, because that's easy to get lost in the shuffle, and I think you would find that very beneficial. Okay, so I want to tell you how many people applied for this job. We had 39 total submissions. We had 8 people who did not complete the process for one reason or another. That was their choice. We had 31 completed submissions. 10 of those people were superintendents. 1 was a state superintendent from out of state. 4 assistant superintendents from various places. The states represented we had 15 states represented, including Alabama. So it indeed was a national search. I would be remiss if I did not tell you one challenge that we face in Alabama. Our state, with the Open Meetings Act, is required to conduct the interviews in public. I am all about transparency. I've been a superintendent, and I truly believe that is so very important. Many other states do their interviews in private with the board, and then the final name is announced in public. When I had inquiries from out of state, from many wonderful people, when they found out that these were public interviews and they could jeopardize their job back at home, not knowing if they would be named the person, that became very frightening. Not the interviews frightening, but the fact that they could destroy a relationship back at home by interviewing with the board in public, and everyone knowing that they'd interviewed, they only wanted to apply if these were private interviews. We do not do that in Alabama, but I think it's something that in Alabama we need to look at, because this is a recurring issue. It does not diminish the slate of candidates that I'm going to share with you, but I thought that was noteworthy to let you know that is something that the challenge that we have in Alabama that other states do not have. Let's see, I told you, I'm sorry I didn't finish this list. I said I believe that we had 10 superintendents, the one state, 4 assistant superintendents, and the rest of the candidates were either central office people, supervisors, directors. We had a couple of consultants, one person who currently is not employed, and then we had a couple of people involved with special programs, but they did have to do with education, but not directly in public schools, working in K-12 schools. So, without further ado, I am going to ask you, Mr. Craig, if you would pass these on down the line. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6. You two on the end will leave it with on together. And like I said, I have a full packet that I'll give you in just a minute of all of the documents that were submitted. And Jason, where are you? Oh, right in front of me. I'm going to, I don't mind if you go ahead and pass those out to the media people here. The first candidate, Dr. John D. Barge, he most recently has been the Georgia State Superintendent of Schools, and he also has been a curriculum director and an assistant superintendent in Georgia, an adjunct professor, and he has had experience as principal, assistant principal, and teacher. Again, Dr. John Barge, Georgia. Next, Dr. Chuck Ledbetter, Superintendent, Dublin City Schools, Georgia. He has also worked in Alabama as an assistant superintendent and as a principal and teacher. Third, Dr. Chris Marzak. He is an assistant superintendent from Oak Ridge City Schools in Tennessee. He has been as an assistant superintendent there since 2013. Prior to that, he worked in metropolitan Nashville public schools in various capacities. Next, Dr. Kathy Murphy, Superintendent, Monroe County Board of Education. She has been a superintendent since 2011, and she has been a principal and an administrative assistant to the superintendent, as well as several other educational roles in administration. The final candidate is Dr. Paul Victor Wilson, goes by Vic. He is currently the superintendent of Hartselle City Schools. He's been a superintendent there since 2013. He was a principal at Mountain Brook and at Homewood. He's been an assistant principal and a teacher as well. Now, oh, I'm so sorry, I just knocked somebody's mic off. When I sat with my colleagues, we had your engagement, we had the PowerPoints that I showed you, the engagement meeting results, and we also had the survey results. I sent those out actually beforehand so my colleagues would have an opportunity to look at those. When we sat down that day, we were looking at we're looking for a match. These are all great folks. It's the match. We're looking for the best match. Who has a proven track record in a comparable district to Hoover? Well, first let me say there aren't a lot of Hoovers out there. But what we look at, we did look for that. We also, though, look for people who have those leadership skills, who whether they're in a small district or a large district, who we perceive have what it takes to come to Hoover and do the job well. Now, we have done preliminary vetting. In fact, for a week, I've been doing preliminary vetting, and I say preliminary because to me it's an ongoing process. We do not contact the people on the reference list. And the reason is because most of these people did not tell their board presidents or key people in their community until today at about 5 o'clock that they were in this to help keep it quiet. Had we called people on the reference list, it's impossible to keep anything quiet. But we did vet these people through other professionals in professional organizations in their state and other people we know who we could trust in our state and in their state to find out about these people if we didn't know them already. I've talked to all of them on the phone. I feel like I know them all at this point just from my conversations. So I wanted you to know that they are expecting, and I am expecting, that you will continue with the process. And you can now because it's public, and they all knew at about 5:45 this evening this was going to be public. Their name would be public. We encourage you to go through the reference list that you will have in your packet and start making calls. Now, you might want to wait until you conduct the interviews. We can discuss that afterwards. So you can determine what your process will be. Not all 5 people need to call every candidate. But we'll talk about a system for that. Also, we need to establish with the board a system for getting input, because you in the public, when you hear the interviews, you're going to want to give your 2 cents worth. And we'll need to come up with a system. Do you want that emailed to you? If they're in the middle of Walmart, Publix, or wherever, and somebody says, I really like the interview of so-and-so. It's so hard to remember all that when 5 people have stopped you. So we'll get a system in place, and it will be publicized as to how you get your input to the board members. And it may be that there are 1 or 2 of the board members whose email address they'll suggest that you send any of your comments to. They don't want to be out on this limb all by themselves either. It's a huge decision. So your input is very valuable, but we also don't want them called at 3 in the morning and that kind of thing. So there'll be a system in place, and it will be publicized so you know what that system is. Can you think of anything, Ms. Frazier, that I need to answer? I think I've covered everything on my notes. Some of these people are in other superintendent races currently. I cannot share that because 2 of them are waiting for it to become publicized on the other end. But I will, within the week, and probably shorter than a week from now, I will be able to tell you who those individuals are. And again, it's just the nature of the season right now. There's so many vacancies around the nation, not just here. This ad went out to literally hundreds of places, and to our own state superintendents, we sent it out twice. It was posted on national boards, the American Association of Superintendents, AASA. It was published on their board. We paid for ads in Ed Week. A number of people who called told me that they saw the ad in Ed Week. So it literally went to hundreds of locations, the posting. That is really all I have to say on this point at this time.
Do you want me to go ahead and get started?
Go right ahead.
You're not leaving us, are you?
No, I won't leave you. I promised you I would not leave you. Until somebody signs a contract, I will be available.
Would you introduce Dr. Harris, because I know she was kind of here.
Yes, this is Dr. Jan Harris. Jan, if you don't mind standing. Jan is recently retired from the Cullman City Superintendency. She and I were superintendents at the same time. I was in Florence. And she is shadowing, doing an excellent job. She's going to begin to facilitate searches also in Alabama. So we welcome her to that capacity. And she and I both enjoy the choir. We really miss not seeing the kids now that we're not in school districts. And I was thinking as I was listening to those lyrics, if only the world would listen and heed the words of these songs that these kids are singing. Very powerful.
At this time, I'm going to go ahead and there's some decisions that have to be made, and we'll go ahead and get started, Lord, if that's okay. Y'all are welcome to stay. These are just some arrangements that's got to be made regarding the interviews and the day-to-day operations as far as what will take place. The very first thing that we need to decide, we are going to, most of you received a copy of the timeline that was, I believe that's been on the website, Jason, is that correct? The original timeline? Okay, we are still committed to that timeline. So as far as conducting interviews, April 20th through the 30th. So interviews we would like to start on Monday. With 5 candidates, there's going to be 1 candidate per day. So gentlemen, the very first thing that we need to decide, there are 8 days from April the 20th to April the 30th. So basically we've got to decide on 5 days that are all agreeable for the 5 of us. And as Dr. Behrens mentioned, I will call the candidates first thing in the morning to congratulate them for making the top 5, and then go ahead and plug in each one of those candidates into our schedules. This is the only thing, audience, that I'd ask the board to come prepared to discuss is, because I know the gentlemen, some are having to take vacation days. This is the only thing that I had asked them ahead of time is please come prepared to give me 5 days of these 8. So basically, if we start with next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all 4 of those days are available. We cannot 2, next Friday's not available. An ideal situation would have been Monday through Friday. And Dr. Reese made me aware that because of an inclement weather day, we were asked to do it next Friday. And a part of each interview, each finalist each day, they will be visiting the schools, and so schools will not be open. So we can, so you've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday available next week, and then we can go into the following week, which starts Monday, April the 27th, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We have to be finished by April the 30th. May 1st through 22nd is when references are checked, site visits, contract negotiated. Our goal as a board is to have the superintendent hired by the last day of school. So, gentlemen, do we want to just kind of take a vote of, let's start with Monday, April the 20th.
What, so you can't do what first?
Okay,
Just have to go through budget.
okay.
But,
Okay, Madam President, on the 28th and 29th, I have two free events out of town that I can't miss. However, if that 29th gets in the way of getting that 5-day mark, I can drive back down as soon as I get out of my meetings. So definitely 28th is not a good day for me. The 29th, I'm still be out of town, but need me, I can travel back 29th.
Mr. Craig, any conflicts?
no conflicts.
Mr. Creeper, any conflicts?
Those.
Mr. Kelly? Okay, so basically, Mr. Murphy, we can honor the 28th and the 29th, so we will scratch those days. Are we good to start on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week, and roll the following candidate into the following Monday? Or would y'all prefer to do 3 next week and 2 the following? I'm sorry, we cannot do that. Hold on just a second. Derek's out on Tuesday and Wednesday. What I would recommend is that we start with candidate 1 on Monday, April the 20th, candidate 2 on Tuesday, April the 21st, candidate 3 on Wednesday, April the 22nd, candidate 4 on Thursday, April the 23rd, and then move to Monday, April the 27th for the 5th candidate. Any problem with that? Dr. Rose, did you see any reason why we cannot? Okay. Okay, so Dr. Behrens, April 20, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 27th. And when I call the candidates in the morning to congratulate them, if there's any problem with these 5 days, we still have available Thursday, April the 30th, if we have to. So gentlemen, I will come back to you if there's a problem with those 5, okay? Okay, the next thing we need to decide, there's 2 ways that, regarding the social gathering, we can meet for lunch, or we can meet for dinner. One thing that Dr. Behrens and I discussed and talked about, and I've already mentioned to Ms. White, an ideal situation would be to have dinner or lunch at the central office. One thing that Dr. Behrens mentioned is if we're at a restaurant, you get a slow waitress or whatever, and we don't make it back in time for that nightly interview, that's not a good situation there. So is everyone in favor of dinner in the conference room at the central office prior to the nightly interviews?
Who else will be involved? I mean, people could maybe.
If the crowd gets larger than anticipated, we can always move upstairs to the tech room. The social gathering is the board, is the one-on-one with the candidate. The press is invited, the public, anybody can come. The doors will be open. There will not be a problem with anybody coming. If no business will be conducted, this is strictly a social gathering, as Dr. Behrens mentioned earlier.
So what do you expect to accomplish with the gathering people must start cleaning up the meeting? My thought is this, I mean, if you're not going to be able to articulate hard questions during the interview process, but their intent is not to challenge these people to make them quit. And to get to know them more in depth, you're going to have to ask questions. You probably wouldn't want to just float out there and tell a story. And if you do it over a glass of tea at dinner, you find you got a conference room full of people, you're about to square one in the interview process. You're never really going to get anything beyond a couple of observations and modeling. So I'm saying, I'm just saying, I'd be in favor of doing something a little more intimate.
Well, can we do that though, Mr. Sweeney?
It has to be entirely social and announced, and anybody that shows up that wants to be in the environment is allowed to do so.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
They bring it to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought.
Okay, so basically, I'm not clear. So I'm sorry. So you're not in favor,
Well, here it is, in essence. I just don't think, for me personally, I don't think another gathering people in the conference room in the central office is going to produce that much more insight. It's something more relaxed, something more intimate. I'm not saying you rent the bar at a big club or anything like that.
you prefer to go somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, let me kind of, yes, sir.
Dr. Reese, since you are, leaving on the superintendent to serve in that capacity, you put yourself in the same shoes, which would be a better idea for you? Being an actual candidate would be an interview.
Mr. Murphy, I would actually not have a preference. I was never treated to a meal or social gathering, so I think either one would be fine.
Let me mention this, let me fast forward just a second. Let me kind of give you some idea. Dr. Barron's sent an example of a typical day of a candidate that comes to visit. And then you tell me if we can fit in dinner somewhere, because I'm not sure we can. Okay, let me give you an option one. Let's say, for instance, that a candidate shows up at central office at 10 a.m. Obviously, we could start earlier, but let's just say 10 a.m., okay? Phyllis arrives at central office at 10. Dr. Barron's indicated that more than 3 visits to schools is probably, that is as many schools as a candidate needs to be able to visit, okay? So we show up at 10 at central office, visit school number 1, and my idea was try to do a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school. Granted, we have more elementary schools, but I think there's a way that we can fit this in just because of the proximity of our schools. So 10 o'clock show up, visit school number 1, then lunch, then visit school number 2, then visit school number 3, back to central office for dinner, and then interviews. Sometime during that day, the candidate is going to have a little bit of time to freshen up before you go into a public interview at, which we haven't decided on a time yet, I'm assuming 7 or 7:30. When is there time in there to fit in dinner somewhere?
Clearly, you can't really do that. I wasn't thinking about the fact that you got a couple of interviews and then they got to the ring all day.
And they don't have to visit the schools, but I just feel like that's the important component of it. They could visit 2 schools. Our schools are, I look at Spain Park and I look at Berry, they're directly across the street from each other. You look at Trace Crossings, you look at Hoover High School, they're right next to each other. It's possible to tighten the schedule just a little bit, and this is just to start the conversation. I've not made any decisions.
My only concern is that if I'm a candidate,
Lunch at the school. At a school. Lunch at the school.
One of the schools. There's things I want to say about myself,
Lunch.
questions I would like to answer that people have. You know, that's a curiosity that I don't want. You know, I think at some point in the equation, well, if they spend the night, we start the breakfast.
What if we inverted that schedule, Mr. Fraser? What if we had the candidate arrive, say, at 5 o'clock for a reception, gathering time at central office? You could have some, not necessarily a sit-down dinner, but have some refreshments, and then go from that point straight into the interview. That would give the person in the night to refresh and start with maybe move it up and do a 9 o'clock, do 2 schools before lunch and do the second lunch at central office, and then the third school, and the next candidate would then arrive at 5.
I think that's a great idea. And the reason I think if I'm say Ken Garvin or Don Hewlin, they come by my school, I would love to see them in action before that. Know a little bit about it.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay. All right, so, Mr. Murphy, you want to say something?
You know, I know we were sitting here talking, but I see principals and assistant principals out in the audience. I know we can't get a lot of information now, but I mean, we need at least two or three, Carol Barber, Don, or assistant. I mean, what do you feel about that particular process of applicants coming to visit the schools? How will they play out in your mind?
Just from our standpoint, depending on when that starts, we have staffing and a lot of things going on in the next 2 weeks for us as principals. Now, they can be school, but I'd love to be part of that visit at my school. And it's going to be very difficult unless we get that really planned a specific time when they're going to be there. And the testing and things going on, I don't know how important that would be for a candidate to just walk through my school at that point. I'm just thinking, you know, if he's been in education or she's been in education all their life, how important is that just to walk through a school as you've been through before? But they may want to see those schools. You know, I'm not sure.
That's a good point, so should we just eliminate school business then?
Don, you alluded to something. Ron, when are assessments? When are the assessments? Spot, plan, SAT?
Now.
Now,
So they'll be over by the time they're open?
No.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Sweetie?
I wonder if Kendi has a thought on the utility of visiting the schools or the process that you're outlining.
Dr. Behrens?
Well, it's really an individual decision. And did they say that student assessments are taking place during this time? That does put somewhat of a different view on it. Of course, any candidate can drive by and see the schools from the outside. With assessments going on, there really won't be many people available. And there aren't many places you can go into school when assessments are taking place. I didn't realize that I don't keep up with assessment schedule anymore like I did at one time when I was in it. So, you know, it's very much a local decision. And if the candidates know that assessments are going on, which the Alabama ones will, they'll understand that because they'll be going on back at home too. You know, just you can explain. So whatever works for you is what's right.
Most of the assessments would be done later in the morning, definitely in the afternoon. So just depending on what time, earlier in the morning, the more likely you are to fall on an assessment.
The high schoolers are not in assessments. They will be, except for they take it.
Yeah, one day.
I would share that from other searches, virtually of comparable schools in this area, every finalist had been to the schools before the interviews, had talked to staff people at those schools, and had compiled some information. And so when they were interviewed by the board, they would say, I know what you're doing at this school or that school, to show that they had really done their homework. So whether it would be an add-on of some significant amount for them to visit the schools, I don't know, but I know that where serious candidates have been applying for comparable schools over the mountain and suburban, Trustful, and so forth, they had really checked out the schools and the leaderships and knew a lot about it. With regard to Earl's suggestion, 2 superintendents ago, Search and Hoover, you did in fact have supper at a restaurant. It wasn't necessarily ideal because you have some distractions, but I think the board members said we saw a candidate in a social setting as opposed to a school cafeteria or something like that. And it was nice to know, particularly if they brought a significant other, to have that context in a restaurant, even if people came up or even if other people came to the restaurant. They didn't necessarily have to sit at the table with them. It wasn't ideal, but I think the board members, 2 superintendents in Hoover, thought that restaurant environment, even and you could streamline it, you could order in advance and that sort of thing, but had some utility. It showed just a little bit different look at what the superintendent would bring to the table.
So a different restaurant each time than regular?
No, not necessarily, but just you don't have to get locked in with a 2.5-hour meal. You call, find out who could serve you on a quick time frame, an hour and a half, because your time's precious, or something like that, and make it as efficient as you needed to.
Ms. Farmer?
I would like to think that any of our candidates that are on this list have done their research on what our schools are. So I'm not sure the value of the school visit, other than that contact with people in the school. It would be a short visit. I'm not sure that would be as valuable for me as perhaps as much as offering some kind of an arrangement where we, the administrators from the building and central office, and even any staff, if they wanted to, could meet the candidates in some type of social setting. I'd like to think that we would have the opportunity to have some kind of dialogue with those candidates. If you go on a school visit, just 1 or 2 or 3 principals or assistant principals would get to meet that candidate. Not everybody would meet that candidate. If there were some kind of open social arena, any administrator in the district, our teacher, anybody who would want to come to meet that candidate could. So from a selfish standpoint, if I wanted to meet all 5 candidates, I could. Versus if it was a school visit, just 1 might come to our school. The school visit, really, I would hope they've done their homework and they know about our schools and they know some of the issues that we're facing. I don't think you're going to get that in a school visit. I think the power of this is that contact with the administrators, so we would just have a feel for who is this person, particularly these people that are from out of state, just to get to know them a little bit.
In other practices or processes, do you see whether you will have 5 applicants? That is narrowed down to maybe 2, and have a second round, not so much of interviews, but bring them in and actually having that social, experience and probably ask more questions. Again, I don't want to elongate the process, but 1 interview, 1 day decides the next 7 to 10 years. So I want to be due diligent in the process. Can we think, any ideas on that? Has that worked before? It's not beneficial.
Well, and I can only address experience I've had with other boards. It's really been rare where they've narrowed it down to 2. 95% of the boards I've worked with, they had after they heard all the interviews and had a discussion, they were ready to name 1 person. But there have been 2 times when one time they went and visited the district, one time they invited the 2 individuals back. You'll get to know more about these people probably than you think at this point that you will, especially when you start calling around to references, or you may have a cousin who lives in one of these districts or whatever. So you will, feel like you have a pretty good grasp, but there's nothing that precludes you from doing what you're saying if you don't feel like you have a good grasp. And for what I'm hearing say, with, especially now that I know that assessments are going on, it may be that a reception is going to better meet your needs than these school trips. And, you know, the principal or whoever back here is correct. You want somebody who's done their homework. So if somebody comes here and they haven't really done their homework about the district, that would kind of raise a red flag with me right there. And you'll find out when they're here for that day, you know, how much homework they've done. But it may, and some districts do a reception. Some do. Counties that are so spread out generally don't do the tours because you cannot get to their schools in a day. Cities generally do tours. But a reception is another way. You can host a reception and anybody can come and chat with that person.
So if we do a 5 o'clock reception each evening, the interview starting at 7:30, that would give all the principals an opportunity to come after hours to the central office to meet the candidate. Would that suffice as far in lieu of a site visit, school visit?
I mean, as that would be what your board members choose. It's, again, it's a local decision.
Will they get enough people enough time to get from their school and wrap everything up at their location and transfer over? I mean, at 5 o'clock time, I mean,
We really and truly interviews should not go past 7 or 7:30. Nobody's going to be on their A game at 10 o'clock at night. You got to think about that. Let me just ask a question. It doesn't matter if you're an educator or not, you're here tonight. Raise your hand if you feel like it's important for these candidates to visit our schools. Just raise your hand. Okay, we're not visiting schools then. Thank you, Mr. Hoover. So, 5 o'clock reception, 4:30 reception. Let's decide on a time that we'll have a reception each evening. So basically, we're going to have a reception, Dr. Behrens, and then go right into an interview.
Well, there needs to be some time in between the reception and when this person can collect himself or herself and get their head in the game for the interview. So
What about a reception at 4 o'clock?
probably not a bad idea, 4:30.
Okay, schools are out at 3:30. So 4 o'clock, 4:30, reception time. You may have a preference, let's pick 4:30.
And how long do you want the reception to be? That's another thing. 4 to 5:30 and then an hour break and whatever.
I mean, I think so, because you and I had talked about, they really do need a little bit of time before they go right into that nightly interview. Okay, let's back it up a bit. Can we do interviews at 7:30? Is everyone agreeable to a 7:30, or would you rather do a 7 o'clock nightly interview?
Let's think about it from the candidate's perspective. I'm walking into a room with essentially, 30, 40 people out of the open. And hang out with them for an hour, and they're going to go sit down, spotlight on, and answer 15 questions that I've worked on, booklet, and what I was prepared to say. And then get back to Carol's point, the disruption about coming by school, this was probably not good because you got a full day regardless.
Why don't you reverse the process? Why don't you do the interview first, get the hard part out of the way, then the candidate can relax, have the reception afterwards. From the candidate's point of view, then he or she's much more comfortable. You'll be able to really see more what that person is like. You've heard the interview. For us, I think that would be ideal.
That was going to be my suggestion. When Fairfield did that, at the reception, there was much more of an interchange between the people that were at the social gathering, because the superintendent had been given an opportunity to say something about what the superintendent's background, interest, that sort of thing, answer questions, what the strength of his or her experience had been. So then when they meet the people, they have a background that they can feed into, asking follow-up questions and so forth. So I think Carol's suggestion is one that worked awfully well in Fairfield.
Okay. Most people in our community, I will just say, get off work at 5 o'clock. What time do we
What about 4 o'clock?
That's our board meeting time, and we always have standing room only, so 5:30? Okay. 5:30, Ms. Crane, that sound good to you? Okay. All right, so 5:30, anybody have a problem? Board first? Everybody's here, figure all this out. Okay, so 5:30, okay, Ms. White? Okay.
No, I would like to say that, if I were being interviewed, I agree. I think I would rather have the pressure off going ahead and having the interview and then having the reception, rather than worrying about during the interview what the questions are going to be. Or during the reception, I would be focused on or worrying about what they're going to ask me in the interview. I think I would rather do it the way y'all have a great fun now.
Okay. Then, Dr. Barry, should we allow hour and a half or 2 hours? What time should we set the reception?
Again, you have a better idea of how many people might show up than I do. I don't, again, that's strictly up to you.
I'm sure Melanie Green will put us out when it's time to go.
Does the candidate need a break in between the interview session and the reception?
Maybe 15, 20 minutes, just to run to the restroom or get a drink of
Okay,
water
what
or
if we
something.
set the reception time for 7:30 then? Because we've got to assume that the interview is going to last about an hour and a half, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Gentlemen, are you okay with that? And then we'll stay at the reception until the last person leaves. So basically, there's going to be no activity during the day then, on these 5 days, correct? Is that what I'm hearing us say?
At some point, we want to do something within the city outside the school. We want to introduce them to council members.
Come to the reception. Jerry, we'll put you in charge of that.
What's that?
I won't put you in charge of getting in touch with the city.
I shall.
There. Okay.
Well, I have it right there, that's one down.
Okay. Is everybody okay now? We've got our 5 days.
So we pared this down to a 5:30 and 7:30.
That is correct. Is that okay with everybody? Is anybody in the audience see any problem with this? Okay. Jason, thank you for offering, where's Jason? Thank you for offering to do the tours for me to the various schools. I don't need you anymore. And Louise, thank you for offering to do the dinners every night, but I guess I don't place it on the airport. Okay. So I'll call the 5 candidates in the morning, get everyone plugged into the schedule. Okay, the protocol for communicating with the 5 finalists. Obviously, I will be the main contact. Dr. Behrens, what's your thoughts as far as can any of the board members contact, or anyone in the community, contact these finalists at any time?
Well, we don't have control over what human beings do in the community. I think the same courtesy should be given to them as we do anybody. I mean, they don't need, again, calls at 3 in the morning asking them this or that. Again, I think just good common sense. It's best if they have a contact person, the candidate has a contact person. And you just said that would be you. And board members, once you start checking references, you'll be busy doing that. There's nothing that precludes anybody from contacting these people, nor can we control that. But I just think that courtesy and respect of these individuals should be kept in mind.
I would defer to y'all's judgment on that as well. But I do think there's some risk if 5 members call a candidate and get 5 different impressions and then come to the table with different impressions that the others haven't had the opportunity to hear or assess. You add confusion to the dialogue. If all of the board members are judging the candidates based on the same interviews, the same answers to questions, the same predicate, it seems to me that's a better basis for rational dialogue.
Okay. Should we appoint two people on the board? I think this came up earlier, Dr. Berry. Should we appoint two people on the board that, if they're willing to do so, that the community could email these two individuals with questions, concerns, whatever, that the board could then relay back to the candidates?
It's probably less confusing to do that than to have everybody be taking those questions. You'll start tripping over each other. But again, somebody will contact you, or you'll run into somebody. It's okay for people to give input. But it's just a matter of how you really want to receive that input. If each of you wants to receive input, or if you want two people to be the persons for receiving that input and sharing it. Again, most of these are local decisions, however you want to do it.
What's your thoughts on the community?
I think the word has been missing from all of this outside the interview itself is consistency. And I don't think it's right or fair to be inconsistent if you ask what to do. As I said, you get very consistent feedback, and the whole process gets away. And I think that if there's some way to stick to the consistent protocol, granted, you can talk to them, you can chat them up, ask whatever questions, but if you're on a mission, bring up something that could answer. And what about the next person who, as an example, you got one person here, he's trying to tech program, right? There's somebody else who's go through that. So you really, I think consistency is an important thing.
And just a variation on that comment, in one superintendent search, a board member had a disposition towards one of the candidates and called another candidate to find out a response, and then shared that at the open meeting, and members of the public said, well, why didn't you call the other candidates and give the other candidates a fair opportunity to address that issue? In this case, the questions were negative, baiting the person to have a response that would be detrimental. And the board members, it became divisive because they said, well, why didn't you give the other applicants the same opportunity or the same burden to address that? And it just became more divisive. So that's why I was suggesting that maybe if it fits your schedule, that you rely on what everybody hears and sees and experiences with the candidates during that formal process, because then that picks up on what Earl was saying about consistency.
So really we've got to rely on...
That's just my copper penny's worth.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think interview and reception time, that affords the community opportunity to come and ask any questions at that point. And also, if they want to listen to the interview question, go from there. So,
Like I said earlier, we'll stay as late as we need to for the reception. I think all the gentlemen are willing to do that. I mean, somebody wants to stay till 9 o'clock or 9:30, just so everyone has an opportunity, everyone in the community, everyone within the school district. So let's just stick to the reception and the nightly interview. Are we good with that? So I will remain the one contact person with all 5 finalists. Okay? Okay, guys?
Just one quick question, Madam President. Now, it was a comment made, I didn't really hear much of it, about allowing video and recording during the actual interview process. And, we have a community that does a great job in recording the board meetings and put them out there. Matter of fact, I occasionally go back and listen to some things as well, so I'm not discounting that at all. But for the purpose of make it a fair process and not allowing other interviewees to hear what the other person is saying. Can we or do you restrict that? Is the question. Again, and that's a thought. Again, I don't want to any type of way step on toes, because again, I utilize those recordings on YouTube a lot.
I would suggest you be as transparent with this as you are with any board meeting, so long as the recordings are not interrupting the process in any fashion, that you just let the protocol of your meetings govern what you do with this.
But I think the point was, Mr. Sweeney,
That is immediately published for viewing, and that candidate, that happens on Monday the 20th, then you have 4 of the candidates that know exactly what all happens.
It's the same questions for every candidate.
That's not something I was considering.
So would it be possible to record all the interviews and then publish them on the web, say, at the end of the Monday the 27th interview?
That's a good idea.
Yes.
I think that's an excellent idea.
And that way, everybody can go back in at that time and review each person's interview.
What's the public's opinion?
Well, the media will be reporting, I'm sure. Mr. Williams and Mr. Anderson will be reporting what went on in the interview. They would be present. So that's going to be in the media.
Do you understand?
That's different than a live stream video.
Now, any candidate could come in and sit and listen to all the other interviews. That I've never had that happen. But these are public interviews. Anyone can come in and sit and listen to all of them, or they can have a cousin come in who knows shorthand, do the whole transcript and send it out. So, it's public no matter what. But some districts choose and announce it up front that they will post them after the last interview. They'll post all 5 on the web. Some do it that way. Some do it day by day. Again, that's personal preference, because you're not going to keep anybody out of any of these interviews anyway. But if you perceive it to be more fair to wait and post them after the last one, I don't see a problem with that.
What do you think? I mean, is that a major thing you concern yourself with?
I kind of like the idea of waiting until the end and posting them at the end. But make sure you give, but here's the thing. Sitting down and looking at, say there's a teacher out there who has a new baby at home. She's just gone back to work, new baby at home. If she needs to quickly watch 5 1.5-hour interviews to be able to see all the candidates prior to you making a decision, say 4 days later, that's really rushed, rather than if somebody can watch them all along as the interviews are posted. I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. So it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another. I know what your goal is. I understand. And there's no right or wrong way to do it.
I think that if I was a 5th interviewee and we were restricting stuff live, I don't have to be the educator just like Jinx, because I know all the answers.
Well, you send out the questions ahead of time anyway. And again, there are no right or wrong answers. So it's whatever you prefer, whatever you perceive to be fair.
Now we decide.
I say,
Live, girl,
I say,
Let me see. I would like to wait till the end and post them at the same time. I think that's
so you
fair.
don't have to vote then.
if you're interested in that, it will show up.
Okay. All right, so interviews will be published at the very end. Jason, are you still in here? Okay. So all the interviews will not be posted until after the very final one.
Now,
Okay.
are we video, audio? What are we doing? Video? Okay.
But you know what I just thought about, y'all? All someone has to do is show up, someone from the audience, videotape it, put it on the web.
From experience.
Those interviews will be out before that county,
So it really doesn't matter.
From experience, you can't prevent someone else from coming there and doing it anyway.
And again, this is, I didn't bring up the question to stop video, I mean, recording at all, just to kind of protect it, you know, they're all professionals, so you can only put up a smoke screen for so long anyway, regardless if you're prepared for it or not, so.
Is there a way to ask the superintendent candidates to be respectful and not be the other? I mean, because there will be, media will cover it and people will post parts of it. I don't know, but is there a way to say, Dr. Barron's known, is there a way to say, hey, we're going to be posting these all along? Or is that like treating them like children?
Probably not. Mr. Cooper, you brought up one point that I just thought about. You said that final one is going to probably have all answers and be the smartest of all. But on the flip side of it, think about this. If you're the fifth one, to me it would be a burden because you would have to work extra hard because you heard 4 different interviews. I think it puts more pressure personally on the fifth person to really get the answer correct. I mean, all the answers, all the questions are going to be the same. I mean, think about that. I'm just, as I'm sitting here watching your videotape, I'm just sitting here thinking that it's going to be done anyway.
You're going.
So why not be proactive?
I really rescind
Just the other
comment.
There are
You will have to vote now.
There are two different dimensions. One, recording the entire interview, and then the other aspect that I think you're going to want to welcome the local TV media at least to have a 3 or 4 minute view of each candidate for their nightly news as that plays out over the week. So I would think you'd want to make an exception for the to accommodate the local media as that plays out, because they'll be so interested in seeing the candidates that you're interviewing.
We have follow-up questions too that aren't written down. So maybe we could ask the questions if we felt like they were rehearsed or no, just the follow-up questions. We're not trying to embarrass anybody. We can get some of them.
And know this too, it's not uncommon for a particular newspaper outlet to contact the candidate a day or two before his or her interview and do his or her own interview with that person, and it will be published. That's just the nature of what goes on during this time.
That's great.
This is difficult to hear, but these are public interviews. The public has a right to hear them. I think if any attempt to limit that right or to control that access is inappropriate. Our candidates are just going to have to deal with what they have to deal with. As you said, the first one before, each one has a certain advantage in the position of interview, and a certain disadvantage, but many of our citizens will not be able to attend, and I think that we don't have the right to limit their access to that information.
Okay, so gentlemen, can we thank you? Mr. Kelly, live or at the end? Mr. Cooper? Stephen?
No. Don't change mine.
Okay.
That's fine.
I'm changing mine to live. Okay, so Jason, each day, a live interview is going to be posted at the end, okay?
I have a question, be live broadcast or after that interview finishes?
You're the computer guy, whatever you want to do.
Streaming,
Whatever's-
I mean, we could do like a hangout on air, Google Hangout on air, and publicize that link every
Okay.
day. That's why I was asking. I need to figure out what vehicle we're going to do it with.
I'm going to leave that up to you and leave that up to Jason. How about that? Now we depend on y'all to handle that for us. Okay, next, Dr. Reese and I met this morning. I asked all the board members to submit no more than 10 questions and also HPTC submitted questions. So Dr. Reese and I picked 15 this morning. I'm going to send those to you, Mr. Sweeney, for one final approval. Once you've approved those, I will forward those. That will be done this week. I will forward those to you, Dr. Behrens, and if you'll forward them on to the candidates. And again, 15 questions, Each candidate will have the same 15 questions.
Let me say something to address that. Just make sure you don't have a lot of 2- and 3-part questions.
We're not.
Okay, because that's really like 3 questions, and you could be here for 5 hours, and you don't want to do that.
We did not, I promise you.
First question was, what part do you think?
Okay.
You don't want to know.
Jason, one thing that Dr. Beers had mentioned is that before any information is given to the press, we do just make sure that Social Security numbers, any personal information is completely marked out. We don't need Social Security numbers lying around everywhere. You're responsible for that for me. Obviously, the candidates will keep up with their expenses. Hoover City Schools will reimburse them for all their expenses. I did talk to Bill Powell with the chamber on the way over here tonight. Second in command at the Winfrey, and I'm not sure the name of the new hotel, it's not Winfrey anymore, but Hyatt, is on his board, and he said there should not be a problem. You know, you and I talked about possibly a hotel room where the candidate has a little bit. Do you think that's necessary now that we're just going to be doing? You still think they need?
Well, I don't, you'll have to look at the distance. Expecting them to drive home after the interview and the reception, given that the reception may go on until 9:30, I think it'd be a nice gesture to offer that they spend the night. Now, some will say, no, I need to drive on back home, I have school tomorrow. But I think that would be courteous to ask them, given this schedule, if you want them to get a room. But it won't be one room available during the day, like we
So
had
can I
talked.
just go ahead and follow through with Bill Powell and just tell him that just go ahead, once I get the schedule lined up, go ahead and line up one night for each one of them, and they can decline if they choose to do so, that we pay by Hoover City Schools.
I think that would be a good thing.
Mr. Sweeney?
That sounds good.
Okay. Okay, the only other thing that I was going to ask, and gentlemen, if y'all have anything, after each candidate completes their, and I know we flip-flop things now, would there be an executive session at the end of each night for the board members? Okay, so we just got to keep our thoughts to ourselves and keep our notes as we go.
My recommendation, based on a past experience, is that after you've interviewed all of the candidates and after you've done some reference to or checking some of the reference in the background, if there are issues that are truly good name and character, at that point have an executive session, but wait until you have the opportunity to find out as much as you need to about each candidate.
Okay. That's all I had, John.
I have a question going back to the actual interview reception. Logistically, how is that going to work? We have the reception upstairs, the city office, and the computer room, and then the actual interview in the boardroom. And is that computer room going to be large enough to accommodate everyone?
Got a tech room. That's why I said when we take the tables out, it would be standing room only. We could try it the first night. We were hoping for a jam-packed house tonight, and obviously it has not happened. So, absolutely. Could we change gears if after the first night, Dr. Behrens, if it's tons of people, we have to shift somewhere else? Is that a problem? To be fair to all 5 candidates.
Just a matter of having good communication so people know where to go, of course.
Okay, are you okay with that?
What if you talk to your friends at the Winfrey and see if they could arrange, I don't know how much that would cost us,
But that way you could have a reception process at one venue. And we're going to be moving.
They must build Powell really well. You know, you do? He's gonna call it next time. What do y'all think about that?
That works for you?
I think there's some advantages. I would just consider the logistics. You want the people to be able to come easily if they want to come, and if doing it there would facilitate that. That's an important consideration. If doing it at the Jack Farr Center is more accessible, I defer entirely to y'all, but I think you want to make sure that wherever you have it, it's the most accessible to your community.
I will get on that first thing, because I know we're going to start on Monday. Yes, sir.
You did, him and Kevin trying to check in, relax, and all that, of course, she goes to the interview.
Mr. Brandon, we're going to stay with you.
But it's still a problem, can't spend time.
Why not have it at Hoover Higher Spring Park already on the building?
I like that.
That gives us more room.
They can see a building, they can get in, see.
Just like we've done here.
Better sound.
How about that? Principals, you have a preference? Who's still here? Ms. Barber, Winfrey, Spring Park, Hoover, Central Office, what's easiest for y'all?
Just making sure it's a place where it's accessible and easy parking.
Okay? Which all those locations would be. We may be a little bit limited to Central Office though. Mr. Neal, what do you think?
I'm good. I think you're going to limit yourself to doing it to central office. I think probably don't have enough space. I'm willing to way to high school, all the schools,
I mean, just last night, we had four
convenience and nothing else.
Okay. So you say Winfrey or Spine Park and Hoover? Which do you prefer?
I think
I prefer Winfrey. I think that's just a nice venue.
Right, let me see what we can do as far as cost. Obviously, it was,
I'm good with it, I don't care.
okay, let me just see, let me talk to Bill Powell, who's going to email me tonight. Let me just see what our possibilities are. I'll talk to the board and then we'll make a decision about that quickly.
Mr. President, can I say something? Having that high school weekday and night, we've got playoffs and everything else, we're going to have traffic issues. At both Spang Park and Hoover High next week, we can do that, so just something.
Brian, maybe it won't break. Is that okay? It's not crazy expensive. Okay, all right, we'll check on the Winfrey and Mr. Murphy, I'll get back to that later on. Yes, sir.
When you check the Winfrey, those ballers, we partition out, because when it's down, we don't need to look like we do on tennis court. We need to have a Jason one available. But
Kind of like our conferences that we go to, you know how they have those dividers there?
we can open up as needed, but we need to do like that.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had. Do you have anything else?
One more thing, Ms. Kenny, as I look through the finalists, any way possible we can get a level of where some of the candidates serve, for instance, let's say principal, but I don't know if it's high school, middle school.
It's in your packet. Make sure I give you your packets. I have thick packets with every detail that they
Okay,
submitted.
okay.
So do not leave, please, until I give you those.
Thank you.
Yes. And I wanted to say one other thing. There's a quick turnaround to these questions because if the first person's coming on the 20th and today's the 14th, we really need to do a quick turnaround if we can.
I'll do it tonight, send to Mr. Sweeney, I'll have it to you tomorrow morning.
And I'm talking to the two of us, I guess. We need to do it quickly.
Dr. Reese and I've already done, we did the questions this morning.
Okay.
Okay.
One thing, back
what they have going on at home too. Most of these are superintendents, and some of them will say, you know, I'm available these 4, but I have this board meeting I cannot miss on this day. So generally, it just works out. One time we had to swap 2 candidates to get one person to be able to be at home for a very important meeting, but
We can easily do, you know, yeah, we can easily do a 1, 2, and 3 top choice and go from there. I mean, you can call it
I'll just call and ask
Kind of
about
a
those
puzzle,
5
really.
days, and then I'll go back and confirm with everyone once I've had a chance, just like we did tonight. Mr. Murphy's the one that had a conflict, everybody else was good to go. How about that? Anything else, gentlemen?
Could I just express 2 matters of appreciation? I think it's accurate to say that every member of this board has said, I don't know, other than my marriage proposal, that I've ever made a more important or had a more important responsibility than what this means. And the gravity with which each of you are taking this, as you've thought about it, worried about it, given you, Donna, suggestions and so forth, I just think is so impressive. And number 2, appreciation for how much time y'all are dedicating to this process to make sure that you thoroughly review every candidate. But that's an enormous time commitment that y'all are rearranging schedules, vacations, and so forth. And I think we need to tell you how appreciative we are of what you're doing with this important task.
We do have gentlemen on the board that are taking vacation days, so I'm glad you acknowledge that. Anything else from anybody in the audience tonight? I appreciate everyone staying.